A teenage sex slave transported across state lines and sold over and over again. Human trafficking is happening every day, and Ohio is at the crossroads of the crisis. Welcome to The Spectrum. I'm Colleen Marshall. Trafficking in people, it sounds like the plot of a movie, and it sounds like a big city problem. But even in outlying communities right here in Ohio, young women are being victimized. It's a problem that made its way to Capitol Hill. And two Ohioans who are at opposite sides of the aisle are coming together for a bipartisan effort to end human trafficking. Republican Senator Rob Portman and Democratic Representative Joyce Beatty are co-sponsoring legislation aimed at ending modern-day slavery. They held a roundtable discussion on the effort this week, and then I sat down with them to talk about what's next.
So it's not only bipartisan, it's bicameral. Something could actually get done in the United States Congress, which would be amazing.
Rob Portman and Joyce Beatty were side by side at Ohio Dominican and will stand together in Congress. Portman has already introduced in the Senate a bill to fight human trafficking and called on Beatty to do the same in the House.
So I have a surprise for you. Before leaving D.C. last night, I dropped the bill.
Oh, fantastic.
So I consider myself an upper-class freshman.
The common goal is to stop sex trafficking, especially when it involves children.
Our legislation is very simple. It acknowledges that there is a connection between missing children and sex trafficking. They're often the most vulnerable among us, and they're exploited. And so our legislation says, let's do a better job connecting the dots to be able to find these children.
Alarmingly, in 2013, 20,000 children were reported missing here in Ohio. 12,000 of them were runaways. 1 in 8 of them became victims of sex trafficking. If a man has sex with the 14-year-old, he is labeled a predator. But if someone is charging him money for the sex, the 14-year-old is labeled a prostitute.
What we want to do is rescue, not arrest. The senator has formed a caucus on the Senate side, so I will be looking at starting a caucus on the House side with Democrats and Republicans, and we're going to talk about rescuing, not arresting.
At the national level, the FBI gets involved when there's a missing child. There's also a national center for missing children. And unfortunately, there's a disconnect sometimes in having the right information at that center. And specifically, unbelievably, there's often not a photograph accompanied with it. So we're requiring photographs. We're ensuring that state law enforcement can update the site more frequently, which they cannot do now, and that there's just better coordination, less red tape between the child welfare agencies, other social services, law enforcement, and this national center.
Is it startling, do you think, Congresswoman, that people hear that teenagers, 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds are being routinely sold for sex?
Absolutely. Part of this is also the awareness to make communities and stakeholders understand that at a very young age that young girls are being targeted. I think the other thing we want to make sure is that we remove child prostitution and we have it as child sex trafficking. So people understand it's not the child that's out there that's the victim, that we want to work together with law enforcement and identify those folks who are actually the individuals that are targeting our children. But there's a big education piece to this.
And as we heard today, too often the victim is treated as the criminal. Is that not the case? Is that what you're hearing?
That's how the criminal justice system works too often. And so one thing we're trying to do at the federal level is to change that so that the child who is involved in this because in a vulnerable state they're exploited is not viewed as the criminal, but rather as a victim, and is provided the services and the compassion and care they need.
We have a Republican senator, a Democratic freshman representative working together on this legislation. What does that say about the spirit of cooperation here, and maybe what does it say about Ohio?
Well, I think it sends the right message that working together as Democrats, Republicans, I'm a freshman in the House, and I have a senator who has reached out and has been mentoring and helping me with the legislation. So I think it sets a good example that Ohio is providing the right kind of leadership so America knows that there are a lot of good things that are happening in Congress.
Is this an example you're trying to set?
Well, yes. I mean, I'll be frank with you. It's always great to work with Joyce Beatty because she is president of her class. She's an up-and-comer. And if you want to get something done in the House among her colleagues, she's a good one to work with. But no, it's, you know, our job is to represent the state of Ohio and to get things done. That's what we were hired to do. And that means putting aside partisan labels. It means putting aside Democrat, Republican, House, Senate. It's about getting things done. And that's what we're doing on this project and some other projects as well.
Thank you both.